Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Ocrolus Product Pulse. My name is Vicky from our marketing team, and I'm joined today by Rebecca Seward, our VP of Product. Today, we're excited to cover a new enhancement that we have for our mortgage lenders, which is going to be our automated conditions product. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A module, and we'll address them throughout and at the end. All right, I'll pass it over to you, Becca.
Great. Thanks, Vicky. All right. So today we're here to talk about how lenders can accelerate their mortgage loan approvals with more intelligent automated condition management. Our conditioning product went live on April 1st, and we're very excited to be demonstrating this today and talking about how it's serving mortgage lenders in the market. So, with that, let's get into it. Next slide, Vicky. Great. So let's first start by talking about the problem that we're out to solve with this product and talk a little bit about the numbers, which tell a really compelling story. So the average mortgage loan life cycle today is around 41 days. And most of the time, that isn't just because of underwriting complexity. It's actually due to the fact that the documentation that is coming back and forth between borrowers and processors is oftentimes incomplete. And conditions are the primary driver of that delay. So, about 95% of loans receive at least one condition, which means that almost every single borrower has to go through this friction. And when they do, they're dealing with an average of around 8 to 15 conditions, each of which requires them to sort of track down and submit additional documentation before their loan can actually close, which is just a massive operational burden, not only on lenders, but on the borrowers themselves, because it creates a really frustrating, often opaque experience for them. And many of these borrowers are first-time borrowers, so they don't necessarily understand or appreciate the nuances of the underwriting process. So here's the Ocrolus insight. We've already had all of the pieces to build out this product. We have the function of classification, data extraction, income analysis, and we were already really deep into the document layer. The missing piece for us was the intelligence layer. And so the next logical step for us was to automatically translate the document data into more auditable, guideline-backed underwriting conditions. And that's exactly what we've built and exactly what we're here to show you today. Moving on to next slide. So this slide really captures what changes operationally when a lender chooses to adopt automation in the form of automatic conditions. So we're going to talk about it from left to right. Without having something that can automate conditions, every single loan file requires manual document review. So some processor underwriter is going through and reviewing those documents manually to identify what is needed. Then conditions are then hand entered into the system of record. In this case, we'll talk about Encompass by whoever is actually working within the loan file. And that means that different underwriters could potentially write different conditions for identical borrower scenarios. That not only creates friction and confusion for the borrower, but it also creates friction and confusion for loan officers and brokers as well, because they have inconsistent experiences depending on what underwriter the loan gets issued to. Issues often get discovered late, sometimes after hours of review, and there's no audit trail. There's no visibility into why a condition was created, changed, or waived. Now, with the implementation of automation and automatic conditions, documents are analyzed automatically at the intake process. Conditions are then surfaced instantly, and they're synced directly with the system of record. In this case, we'll talk about Encompass, either one at a time, or you can do it in bulk. And the logic is consistent across every single loan because it's guideline backed. It's not based on underwriter discernment and it's not underwriter dependent. Gaps are flagged before the underwriter even has to open the file. And every status change is timestamped with a user ID and details about what changes were made and when. So every single condition shows the trigger source, the selling guide reference that fired it, so that underwriting teams have the auditability, the traceability that they need to feel confident around the response that Ocrolus is generating. So the key message here for you all to learn is that this isn't necessarily trying to replace underwriting judgment. In fact, we very much want to keep the underwriters involved in the process. But what we're attempting to do is eliminate the manual search that is needed so that their judgment can remain on making the final underwriting decision and they can spend time doing things that actually require human judgment. So with that, I think we'd love to talk through the conditioning product itself. So I'm going to show a demo here of our George and Martha Washington loan application. Vicki, if you could take down the demo, I can show the product. All right, great. So we have a product called Inspect. And last year, we launched this product to identify discrepancies that exist between the loan file data and the document data. And this is to surface originally three types of discrepancies. The first discrepancy is a field level mismatch, where there is something within the 1003 or Encompass that does not line up with the source document. The second discrepancy could be that there is context within the document that was not on the application. So, for example, an undisclosed debt, a potential undisclosed REO property. And so that can surface details that are needed to be added to the 1003 for completeness purposes. And then the third discrepancy type that we had live last year was there is a data point in Encompass or on the application that was unsupported by any document that was processed by the borrower. So, for example, I say I work at Ocrolus, you would expect for me to upload some sort of supporting documentation for that, whether it was a pay stub, a W-2, a verification of employment form, etc. Now, that third discrepancy type that I mentioned is something that we are now mostly treating with automatic conditions. So, for example, if I say I work at Ocrolus, we will automatically generate a condition based on missing documentation that the borrower did not supply. And so the other two discrepancies are still flagged, and we still believe that they're useful to inform a more complete, more high quality loan file submission into the underwriting team. But we're also now automatically generating the conditions that are needed to move the loan into the approval cycle. So let's go through a couple of insights based on that context. Now, if I have a borrower field level mismatch, for example, and I review this insight, I can see that there is a value that exists within Encompass of the Social Security number, and there are also different variations of that same data point that were found within the documents. Now, my job as a processor or an underwriter is to then decide what I can do with this information. I have a few options at my disposal. I can choose one of the values based on my review of the documentation to decide, is the source data true based on what's in the application, or can I validate that this is accurate based on the documentation? I can select that value and I can queue it up for import back into Encompass. My other option would be to convert this insight into a manual condition. So perhaps I need to get a Social Security verification form for this borrower because there are inconsistencies on this data element across the loan file. I can then convert this into a condition and import that into Encompass so that I can satisfy this requirement based on additional supplemental documentation or information that I then acquire. Again, this is to try to improve the quality of the application data that you are submitting over into the loan underwriting team. The last thing that you want your underwriters to have to do is to operate as admin assistants, having to key in data elements into the 1003 or stare and compare across the application data and the document data that's being sourced. In this case, we might want to treat the document as the source of truth, or perhaps we can ignore this completely and say that it's not a relevant discrepancy that needs to be managed. The second discrepancy type that I mentioned was something was in the documentation that was not found in the application. So, for example, we have a potential undisclosed debt. We can see within here that one of the bank statements showed an afterpay payment. Buy now, pay later services are becoming more prominent for borrowers these days. Sometimes it could be a $5 bill pay to DoorDash because you funded a burrito. But other times it could be a larger expense that could potentially have impact on the debt to income ratio for the borrower. So we are surfacing this discrepancy. We are showing that there is an afterpay payment, showing you where within the document that was obtained, and then you have a couple of different options here to resolve. You can add this value directly to the VOL screen of Encompass. You can choose to ignore it if, again, it is that $5 payment. Or, again, you can create a condition to potentially get information around a payoff statement or more details around when this afterpay payment is going to be fully fulfilled. So, lenders can go through section by section of the 1003. They can look at the address, asset, borrower details, employment details, and beyond to correct any sort of data quality issues or incompleteness of the 1003 information with insights themselves. I can review the 1003 information at the same time as reviewing these insights. This dashboard screen is implemented directly into the Encompass LOS, but instead of a lender having to shift through the dashboard experience and then going back to look at the 1003 screens in Encompass, they can actually see what 1003 information we're sourcing from to create these insights. So this gives you all of the information you need to validate whether these discrepancies are accurate within one screen, rather than having to swivel chair between systems. Now, on the conditioning front, as I mentioned, that third discrepancy type that was previously available in Insights, where a document was missing based on the application data that was stated, most of those are now being handled with conditioning. So we cover three categories of conditions today. We focus on the assets, credit, and income reviews, and we are building those conditions based off of agency guidelines. So primarily, we're focused on Fannie and Freddie loans today. But Ocrolus does have intention to expand both the condition type coverage into more complex areas of the underwrite, like collateral, title, etc. And we also have plans to expand the loan coverage. We plan to add support for investor overlays in addition to supporting government loans. But today it is assets, income, and credit for Fannie and Freddie. Now, I can review this again by the category of the underwrite that we are focused on. So there are no asset conditions in this loan file, but I can see there are 5 credit conditions and I can see that there are 7 income conditions. Now, if I go to look at one of these conditions, for example, this pay stubs condition, I can see the details that informed it. So I can see that there was a pay stub that was provided that is not dated within 30 days of the application date. We supply details around the pay stub date, the application date, and how far off from the application date that pay stub is. And then we fill in the details around the condition name, the condition description, what document would be needed to fulfill it, and who owns that condition. We also provide a preview of the document that informed this condition if relevant. If there is no document, we obviously would not have a preview here. And then we have reference to the selling guide section that actually informed this condition. So this shows that this is not Ocrolus opinion. This is not an Ocrolus generated condition. This is something that came from the selling guides directly, and that is why we are conditioning for this updated pay stub. Lenders do have the options to control both the name and the description of any given condition. We recognize, of course, that certain lenders have templated conditions, both within legacy and enhanced condition versions of Encompass. And so we can actually tailor the condition name and description to be more consistent with what your team is already used to within your templated language. We also recognize that enhanced conditions support different descriptions and different condition names for both the internal and external review. So if you're creating an external condition that might be surfaced through your point of sale and go directly to the borrower, we can make the language of the condition description be more borrower facing. And instead of just stating exactly what is needed to fulfill it, we can actually say, listen, borrower, you need to upload a more recently dated pay stub because the one you provided was outdated and not within 30 days of the application date. We do give lenders the ability to discard conditions. Now, there might be rare instances in which Ocrolus didn't have the appropriate context to know whether or not to waive a specific condition, or perhaps it just wasn't able to apply the same level of human discernment that an underwriter would to determine whether or not a condition was required. This is based off deterministic logic, so it will be imperfect, just like any other machine product might be, but we want to give the controls to the lenders to be able to decide what to do with the output. And based on the discard behavior, Ocrolus can actually learn. We are trying to observe human patterns and how underwriters interact with our conditions to be able to know, okay, maybe there's one specific condition type that constantly gets discarded, or maybe there is a specific lender that seems to be discarding a specific condition consistently over time. That is really good training data for Ocrolus to leverage to be able to build more agentic probabilistic solutions over time. And so we have our deterministic logic based on the agency guidelines that tells us, based on this information, a condition is applicable. But learning through human behavior, we can also see, okay, maybe it's not so deterministic in every single instance. Maybe there are certain scenarios in which we shouldn't apply this condition 100% of the time. So that is why we like lenders leveraging this dashboard experience to review these conditions because it informs the work that we do in future roadmap discussions based on human behavior within our platform. I'll show a few other condition types. We're looking at W-2s. Here's an example where maybe we didn't have the document that was necessary for this condition type. So we would state here that a W-2 is necessary for George Washington, for Marshfield Engineering Group. We don't have either his 2025 or 2024 W-2s. And so that is why we're creating a missing condition for W-2s. We have the document needed, we have the owner. And again, lenders can see the agency reference that informed why this condition was generated in the first place. You can see the needs list item over here. So if a processor, if a loan officer, if a loan officer assistant is on the phone with a borrower, in real time, they can actually see what documents are necessary to get this loan file complete over to an underwriter and ready for approval. So instead of having to go through each condition or looking at conditions in the system of record, it's very clear that I am missing 10 documents, and these are the 10 documents that I need, who they belong to, etc. I can also see the source documents. So this would be the list of all of the documents that we referenced that informed the conditions that we generated. Now I'm going to go over to a different loan where we actually imported some of these conditions directly into the system of record. And so you can see here that I have options to import each one of these conditions into Encompass. This was designed primarily to support a manual review for underwriters where they can come to the dashboard, they can see the details of each description, and then they can choose which ones they actually want to import into Encompass into the system of record. This is also for us to be able to learn through human behavior, which conditions frequently get accepted, which conditions go through without human intervention. And that can inform where we need to focus our future development work to make sure that we are consistently focused on specific conditions that need more love. But otherwise, if I click on import, I can do it one by one, or I can import them all at once. Over time, as underwriters and lenders build trust with our platform, we can actually eliminate that manual review. We can generate these conditions and push them automatically to the system of record without someone having to come into this dashboard to review each condition. That said, this dashboard will always be available to lenders for audibility and traceability purposes. A lot of different automation solutions out there, their logic lives within a black box, and it's not always very clear to the underwriting teams where each condition was generated from. Excuse me, why each condition was generated. And so this gives them that transparency that they need to be able to understand where did this condition come from? Why did Ocrolus generate it? What document might it have been sourced from? And that gives them the comfort that they need to be able to trust the system to create the output that is necessary. But once a condition is imported, we do also have the ability to track and trace the status. So I can see here what the status of this condition is. This is fully bidirectional with the system of record. So if I update a status here within this condition, it will flow through to Encompass, and vice versa. If I update a status within Encompass, you come to this dashboard screen, you will see this updated status reflected here as well. Now, because we create these conditions and we create the document placeholders that are needed to fulfill them, we can actually review trailing documents and see if and when the document that we requested is uploaded into the system. So say, for example, I created a condition for a missing pay stub. I also created an e-folder placeholder for that missing pay stub that is associated to the condition. We will actually read all of the trailing documents that come in after that initial document set to see if the correct pay stub was uploaded, whether that came in through File Manager or it came through a task in the point of sale directly into the e-folder placeholder for said condition. We will then pick it up, see if it fulfills the condition, and we'll do one of two things. If, for example, we create a condition for 2 years of tax forms and only one tax form year was supplied, we will then update the description of the existing condition to say, hey, we got 1 year of tax forms, but we're still missing the other. And so that condition is a living artifact that will be updated based on the trailing documentation that came in. If the correct documents were fulfilled, we right now put it into a review state where we suggest, hey, it looks like this condition was fulfilled, looks like we received the correct documentation needed for it, and we believe this can be cleared. Again, over time, we expect to see and track the behavior of how often lenders are accepting that review state, and we plan on completely automating the clearing of conditions as well. So this really enables team members to sort of take a crawl, walk, run approach with automation around conditioning so that you don't have to automate every stage of a condition lifecycle from day one. You can start with maybe manually reviewing the conditions and manually selecting when to import them. And then once you build that level of comfort, you can automate that process. Similarly, you can get comfortable with the idea of which conditions Ocrolus believes it can fulfill and mark as cleared. And once you develop that level of comfort, you can move over into the fully automatic workflow of Ocrolus creating and clearing the conditions based on the trailing documents uploaded. One final thing that I want to mention before we take questions is just what information is Ocrolus intaking to inform this conditions list? There's really three sets of data that we're looking at. We're looking at the loan file data directly from Encompass, or in certain cases, we can also just read a MISMO form that's uploaded directly into the dashboard. We are reading the document data. So obviously, Ocrolus processes the documents, we classify them, we extract data from them, and we use that extracted data and compare it to the application to see what conditions might apply. And the third source is going to be third-party data. We do reference AUS findings to inform these conditions, and in cases where there are duplicates, we will deduplicate against what we created versus what AUS created, and we'll also use AUS to self-correct conditions that we create. So for example, on the tax return piece, again, if we condition for 2 years of tax forms, but AUS only requires one, we will self-correct our condition and present the 1 year tax return requirement that was determined by AUS. So we're always going to treat AUS as the source of truth there. The second third-party data source we're referencing is credit report details. With our hookup to Encompass, we can actually download the latest XML copy of the credit report, and we can use that to inform our credit report conditions. So rather than a lender having to send us the PDF report of a credit report, we can actually pull the digital copy down and use that to inform the efficacy of our credit report conditions. And so with those three insights and our understanding of the agency guidelines, we always produce highly accurate and very valuable insights for our lenders so that you can automate the more remedial, more repetitive, more redundant areas of the underwrite, which are assets, income, and credit. And we're very excited about the feedback we've received so far from this. It's saving underwriting teams a ton of time, and it's standardizing the way that underwriters are reviewing loan files across their customer base. So as we build onto this more, we react more to client feedback. We're excited to kind of take this into more complex areas of the underwrite and continue to provide more value for our customer base. So with that, Vicky, I believe I'm done with the demo unless there are certain questions that need to be asked.
All right. Thank you so much for showing the product, Becca.
Mhm.
Um, we're almost at time, but just two questions that have popped up. One, I believe this one was coming up when you were showing the insights, but could you please explain the setup process? For example, would we be uploading a 3.4 MISMO file and then standard credit documentation, or what does that process look like?
So it really depends on how we are delivering this product to our lenders with clients who we have a direct integration with the Encompass loan file for. If you're an Encompass customer, you don't need to send us necessarily anything. We're going to review the loan file data directly from Encompass, so you don't need to send us a MISMO. We will actually just pull the information that we need directly from the IRLA forms within Encompass, and we use that to inform what insights and conditions we're generating. Now, we do support MISMO parsing for lenders who maybe don't use Encompass or maybe they use a system that we're not fully integrated with yet. We're actually doing that process for POVs for some of our customers, being able to ingest a MISMO file and use that to inform insights and conditions. And so in that case, you would just upload all of the borrower provided documents, upload the most recent MISMO file, upload any credit report or AUS findings, and with all of that information, we're then able to generate the conditions. But for our clients who leverage Encompass, you don't need to send us a MISMO. We can just download that directly from our integration.
All right. Thank you, Becca. And then one other question. So if I'm in Inspect and I only see the Insights tab, I'm not seeing the Conditions tab, how do I get access to conditions?
So for that, you're going to want to reach out to your account manager. We do have this product behind a feature flag, and we're very excited to talk about the opportunity for lenders to gain access to it. But for that, you would reach directly out to your Ocrolus account manager, and we can discuss how to make it available in your platform.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all the questions we have. So thank you everyone for joining. Please be on the lookout for an email tomorrow with the recording here. And if you have any additional questions on automated conditions, we'll have an office hour session with Anthony and the account management team on Monday. So thank you everyone and enjoy the rest of your day.